Hello, 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 and welcome to this session. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Fatima Saleria. I am the Executive Chair of the TV Festival. I just want to lay out the thoughts of our motivation for why we wanted to do this session today. For us at the festival, we are hoping that this session is the start of something new that will blossom into an annual kind of gathering where all voices are heard, where we can have amazing discussions with people, and we can, hopefully, we will have the movers and the shakers of the industry in the audience to kind of sit up and listen. This panel has come together very, very quickly. We decided to do something around this last Friday. I am incredibly grateful to these people for coming here, giving up their time to come and discuss this really important issue. But in terms of our motivation for why we wanted to do the session, in light of what's been going on in the last couple of weeks across many parts of the country with the race riots, it was clear to me and to the festival that there was a lot of issues to discuss, not just for people who work inside the TV industry who are from a Muslim background, but also I wanted it to be a space where people were able to talk about some of the events outside and representation, and whether or not, in a way, and this is a question, we have failed to represent Muslims in a way that people feel that they are still part of a community. And we wanted to try and examine one of those issues, but I want to be able to give a space here for people like me and for the rest of this panel, where events like what happened in the last 3 weeks, for some of us are not new. For some of us, there is a fatigue and there is a sadness that this has happened again. And I think it echoes with a time where you have felt we had moved on, and where we felt that when we walk into a room, we are not going to be judged either by our names or by what we wear, and that we are going to be judged by who we are and what we are bringing to the table. And it was, I think, with sadness that I felt that we hadn't really reached that stage yet. I think the other thing for me is that there was a sense that we still feel other, and that we still don't feel that we either have a space at the table, at some of the industry conversations, or that when we are allowed to have a seat at the table, we are coming there because of who we are as Muslims. So I would say, though, it is true that we have a much better representation of Muslims in TV. Obviously, Nadia, national treasure, Zainab and Mobeen on Race Around the World, absolutely amazing to see them. Fatima Manji, trailblazer for Channel 4. And of course, Lady Parts, which totally changed the perception of how people viewed Muslim women and kind of saw them in a broader, funnier context. But if you scratch the surface a little bit, and let us be honest, because this session is about honesty, let us be honest about this. The decision-making corridors still remain, I would say, closed to people like us. And how that impacts on authentic portrayal of Muslim people's lives are huge. If you do not have that diversity of thought in that room when decisions are being made around a particular community, I don't think you are ever going to get a fair representation of that. But okay, enough from me. Hopefully this will give you some kind of idea of what I want this session to be. As I said, I am incredibly grateful for you all joining this. Literally lastminute.com. I am not going to go into a very long introduction of the bio. These people are exceptional. They are trailblazers in what they do, so I'm going to be very brief because I want to get into the chops of all of this. So, this is Ola Labib. Ola is a star in British... I said I wasn't going to introduce you, but I will do a little bit. Sorry, I just can't help it. Ola is a star in British comedy. She made history as the first black Muslim woman to go to the O2, where she was, I was literally about to say, supporting Mo Gilligan.
I was supporting Mo Gilligan,
you were absolutely supporting Mo Gilligan,
yeah.
Absolutely. Next to Ola, we have the lovely Suhail Shah, who is the MD of King of Sunshine Productions. Next to Sohail, there is Raisa. Raisa is a screenwriter, and she was also in the writers' rooms for the 2 series of Lady Parts. And then we have Tez. Tez is here at Edinburgh on a show called After 8. Comedian extraordinaire, has done lots of stuff for the media, and is going to be our voice here that is going to make sure that this does not turn into a homework session, which has been bandied about quite a lot. And then we have the trailblazing head of content next to him, Nasveem Huck, and next to Nasveem is Amber Huck. Now, Amber is a presenter. She's got a brilliant podcast at the moment called
Bad People.
Bad People. She is a documentarian, and she has worked for the BBC and lots of different channels. So please, could you give them all a round of applause? Thank you. Oh my God. Oh my God, this was a disaster now. So the last thing I will say before we get into this is the important bit. We obviously want to hear from you guys. So there is a place to submit questions. You've got to go onto the Edinburgh app, which hopefully is downloaded on your phones. And then remember that this room is called Fintry. So if you want any questions, you've got to kind of navigate all of that. Okay, so Amber, I'm going to start with you very quickly. I'm going to start with you. Talk to me about what it was like, because you were working during that particular week of the first week of the riots. What are your personal reflections on that, and what was it like for you doing that?
So yeah, I was presenting the Drive programme on the Asia Network, and you know, there's something about radio which is, it's this intimate space anyway for people, and you're talking so directly to them. So to have just been a part of that for 3 hours every single day through all the aspects of that riot, hearing from people who were genuinely fearing for their lives, you know, talking to people who'd had their grandparents' graves desecrated in Burnley, to, you know, immigration lawyers who were hiding at home, you know, because they were getting death threat phone calls. Like, just hearing that so much is obviously extremely traumatizing, and you're trying your best to like provide support for people as well. It's quite difficult to kind of manage. And then, you know, even how I was having to physically get there was on the train. I was having to go via Stoke to get back to where I live, and Stoke was obviously this very like violent hotspot that kind of popped up. There's a migrant hotel literally right outside the train station. And I think what was like, my dad had to board up his taxi company as well. So that's all whirling around your mind, being like, your family going to be safe? But I think for me, it was like, I noticed subtle things that I was doing. Like when I was getting on that train, I was going out in public where I'm like smiling harder at people to see how they're kind of responding to me. And like, you know, one morning I woke up and this fleeting thought went through my mind of like, oh, should I put my Man United top on today? And I was like, why? I took a second to be like, why have I thought that? Like, just to be clear, Man United are a type of religion for me. I'm not like, but, you know, is that idea of it. It made me think back to even when I've been younger of how you're just constantly thinking about how can I just be a bit more palatable, you know, just a bit more like fitting in. And I think I just looked back. It was just triggering to think back to since like 9/11 happened. Probably I think I was like 5 or 6 years old. All I have ever known of that imagery that's been reflected back. You know, it's the first point where it's like, I'm so close to my dad. I love my dad so much. He's like the most gentle, generous person. It was like the first time I saw him reflected back to me in this imagery as someone who was like dangerous and, you know, othered and someone to be feared. It was like, it was so confusing. So it brought up all those feelings for sure.
Ola, is there anything in what Amber has said that you can identify with, you know, in terms of how that week was panning out for you?
Yeah, so I don't like live in a big city. Well, it's not really a city. So I come from a seaside town. So I don't come from a very multicultural place, and we're kind of known for the EDL. We're very heavily BNP. Like that's what my town are known for. So I didn't go out in that whole week until it quieted down. One time I did, but I got a lot of. There was an incident where I got comment, and then I started like Googling stuff like, oh, you know, ordering a taser, ordering pepper spray, but obviously it's illegal in this country. Did I get it? Maybe. But it's exactly the same. Like it's always there, but I definitely think like the riots and everything that's happening really heightened people. And there are people that think it that would never do anything about it. But I think when they started seeing people are going out, they were like, yeah, this is our opportunity. Yeah. This is our only time where we can actually go out and like really do what we've wanted to do for so long, because there's so many people doing it. So I 100% get you.
And Ola, one of the things that, you know, I'm a Muslim woman from a Pakistani background, and I know just through my work that I've done throughout the years that the experiences of black Muslims and the experiences of Muslims from South Asia are different. That at times, I think when you peel back layers, there are different layers that people think about, particularly around what happened in that week when the guy was, people thought he was a Muslim, and then he came from Rwanda, and then the whole issues were around immigration and refugees and asylum seekers. Is that something that you have had to deal with that is different from the experience of Muslims like me?
Yeah, so black Muslims make up such a small minority. So Muslims are approximately, 10%, and black Muslims are 10% of the 10%. So like a lot of the times people don't identify like black people as Muslim. Like I wear a hijab, so I'm evidently Muslim, but my brothers, they're, quite dark skin, big afro hair, and people would make the comments. They're like, oh, you're Muslims, but your brothers aren't. Like almost like, oh, if you're black, it just means you can't, they don't put two and two together. And that does come with representation, because predominantly on TV, the Muslims that are represented are South Asian. No offense, guys, nothing wrong with that. So like they're usually represented as South Asian. So we kind of, people don't know what to do with us. But do you know what? In the riots, they would attack a Chinese person and be like, F off back to Muslim. Do you know what I mean? It didn't really matter where you came from. It didn't really matter what you're really, there were Sikhs getting beat up saying you effing Muslims, and they're like, what the hell are you doing? So I think when it comes to the riots specifically, I don't think it really mattered. I think as long as you weren't white, then you were impacted, regardless of your race, religion, or whatever. Would you agree? Yeah.
So Sahel, for you, when you were, Salford and Manchester is a place very close to your heart. Mm-hmm. What emotions were running through you during that week when you were watching some of those events unfold?
So I think for me, it's affected me much more than I thought it was going to, if that makes sense. I was really annoyed by it. I was really saddened by it. And then as the day went on, when it first kicked off, by the end of the day, I was very, very sad. And I was very, very angry. And I think what made me what affected me the most was, it wasn't just the fact that it had happened, it was the fact that it had affected my mum and dad as well. And that, how close I am to my parents, and anything that gets to them really winds me up. And it was like, they've lived in this country, this is their home. They've lived here far, far longer than they ever did in Pakistan. They've been here for over 50 plus years. So this is their home. And I could see on my dad's face especially, they were thinking, how are we at this position in 2024 when this easily could have been 1971 when we first came over? How have things not changed? And if they have changed, well, I would argue they have changed, because it feels like it's even more nasty and even more dangerous now, because there are other avenues of getting your hatred out, whereas before they used to march the streets and there were skinheads and there's a sign, which still happens now, but there's so much more pervasive and there are so many more ways of getting at people and doing damage, and it's triggering as hell. It really is. So I was very sad all week, and I got more and more angry as the time went, and then I felt like I don't know what I wanted to do about it, excuse me, but I felt like I needed to say something. So on my not my personal one either, on my company LinkedIn, I just I just posted what I felt, what I thought, and that was, this isn't right. We need to come together. We need to address what's going on. Everybody needs to address what's going on, and please reach out and protect people who might look like me, might look like Ola. in your circle, because they are really going to need your help, not your hate. They've got your hate. They're going to need your help. Freudian slip, everyone. Apologies.
Spoiler. Plot twist.
So yeah,
So Naz, I can imagine for you, the emotions that we've talked about will be very similar. But how were you navigating some of those conversations at work? Because, we're still going to work. We are still in that space. How difficult is it when you're seeing stuff play out?
I mean, this is probably the first time that I'm speaking about it publicly, right? So even this is hard, because actually we've all probably had those conversations in familial spaces. And actually what you were saying about your parents is interesting, because I'm just thinking about my dad saying to us as kids, we're educating you so you have a better life than we did. And I'm reflecting on that and thinking about that quite a lot. So it's too early to say, because we're all still processing. And in truth, anyway, the last couple of years, we've all been having those conversations, right? We've all been progressing. So in truth, it feels like it's something that we're still processing, in truth, I think.
Okay, and Tez, were you performing during this time?
So I was here.
So what was
I
it
missed
like
everything,
for you? I'm really interested to find out.
I was
Did you
gutted.
incorporate it into...
Oh no, it was a great week for me in terms of comedy. what a great time to be a comedian that was. Get it in. The show was getting a bit stale. I thought, yes, new material. That was a bit annoying for me, because I was here in Edinburgh when everything kicked off, and my family and friends were really scared. Like, I come from Blackburn, which is like hotspot. And my cousin texted me. He's 18 and he works in a fast food chain in the town centre. And he texted me, and I think there was a big EDL gathering planned. And they're not called the EDL anymore. They keep telling me online, but whatever they are called now, EDL 2.0, whatever they are, they were gathering in the town centre Saturday morning. And he's texted me on Friday night saying, I don't know whether I should go into work today or not. And I kind of convinced him that he should. Because I was like, you come from a long line of people who stood up to these people. And so we're not going to be that generation that sort of backs down from this. And then as it turned out, a lot of young men from the community came out in quite strong force, and nothing ended up happening. And actually a lot of people from the town who weren't from our community talked about how well behaved those scary looking men were in town, and how respectful they were towards everyone, but they just wanted to make sure that their community was safe and could go about their business. And they kind of, I think only like in the end, a handful of those types turned up, the EDL types turned up. And so as it was, Blackburn was kind of okay in comparison to the towns. But I found like where the most trouble occurred was in those places where we were the least represented. So in places like Sunderland and Stoke and Liverpool and sadly Southport and places like that. Portsmouth probably would have been another area, but for some reason didn't kick off in the same way. But there were places in the south that did, and then Northern Ireland as well. And the whole week reminded me of a conversation that I had with my uncle about 25 years ago in the late 90s, because my uncle was investing a lot of money in Pakistan, like buying land, properties, that sort of thing. And I remember saying to him, why don't you just spend that money here? Like, why aren't you investing in business here? Why aren't you spending your money here? And he said something to me that I'd probably forgotten for a long time. He said to me, well, one day they might kick us out. It's probably a conversation that...
My parents always...
it's probably something that
always invest outside. He went, one day, he said, they'll kick us out.
Yeah, and I remember...
He always says that.
I remember laughing at him going, come on, mate. Like, we're British. Like, that's the law. They can't just, like...
Really
you know how big, like, that, how much they have to unpick to, like, kick us out? And then my uncle said to me, and that really stuck with me, the second thing he said to me was, they might not formally kick us out, but one day conditions might be as such that we might want to leave. And I thought that week I really thought about that.
I think that is such an interesting thought, because when you listen to what the Minister for Scotland, the former Minister of Scotland, I know his name is Hamza, please.
Hamza Yousaf.
Hamza Yousaf. And what he said about going back with his family because he no longer felt safe here. I can imagine, I was born here. My son was born here. He is of mixed race heritage. And having a conversation with him as a 19-year-old, basically saying, you know, looking around this, because he thinks he lives in a post-race world. He doesn't understand these issues. He is a Chelsea fan. He goes to the football.
That's brave.
It is incredibly brave.
Let's break that.
I don't want to call your son an idiot, but
Well, you know, the history of that football club is something that, you know, fills me with anxiety. Obviously got better. But watching the scales fall from his eyes, where he realised that he had to kind of think about these issues now. He just thought he just never thought about that. And it is a really sad thing when you see your child having to realise that he's going to be judged by the colour of his skin. And it's not because we protected him from it, it is because he thought that kind of world was over. Rosa, can I just bring you in on this in terms of your perspective on what you saw and what was happening around you? Has that influenced your approach to some of the stories that you've written either in the past or stuff that you've looked for now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a funny place because I'm Scottish and I don't think the tensions are as bad up here in a very obvious way as they have been in England. So when the riots were kicking off, we were obviously terrified and we were thinking, gosh, this is going to happen here as well. It was quite heartening to see that any kind of sense of it was very quickly nipped in the bud, and it wasn't down to our communities necessarily, it was down to all Scottish communities. I think there is an issue where sometimes in Scotland people do say, oh yeah, we don't have racism. We do have racism. It's hidden in many ways. We do have those issues. We just, I don't know, maybe our government deals with it a little bit better. Maybe our communities, I don't know, I can't explain it, right? I can't explain why it's slightly different here and it didn't kick off in that way. I do remember one day there were all these rumours of there's going to be something happening in George Square and here and there, and I said to my dad, please don't go to work, because he's a taxi driver, and I was like, you're gonna land in the middle of something. And I was texting everyone, and I had friends texting me going, someone's been beat up here, and there's rumours of this, and there's rumours of that, and there were a lot of rumours. And those rumours are almost just as bad, because what they do is they stop you from living your life, and they make you really scared to exist. And when you're visibly Muslim as well, because these riots weren't just race riots, they were Islamophobic. And I think for me, one of the things was the UK government was unwilling to use that term, and unwilling, and I felt quite gaslit by that, if I'm being very honest. But I was thinking a lot about why has this happened, right? And my world is the scripted world, and it's all about representation of people on screen and how characters are constructed and how stories are constructed. And the reality is, people of colour, and especially Muslim communities, have been painted as the villain for decades now. We have been made the villain in so many narratives that it's easy for people who have never met a Muslim, a person of colour, an immigrant, a refugee, whatever it might be, to just assume we must be bad people because of what they've seen on screen. Mm-hmm. So there's a real challenge there in terms of not just the lack of representation, but the type of representation. And I get really sick of having this conversation around representation, because I just go, there is talent there are stories there are people there, but they're not being commissioned.
So you get sick of having those conversations with people. How do you navigate that, and what do you do to make that better?
I mean, I still have to have the conversations. I challenge them. I have to put myself in positions where I ask difficult questions, and I have to not worry about the implication it might have on me, but as in those conversations for me are constructive. I'm not going there to have a moan, right? I'm going there to say, we have a problem here, there's a bigger issue. And I know that, one conversation isn't necessarily going to change everything, but it might have that knock-on effect. I do panels and stuff like that at festivals. I was at a festival a couple of years ago, and I put out the provocation to a lot of people that were execs and stuff, and I said, what does your friend circle look like? How many people in your world do not look like you, do not have the same faith as you, do not come from the same class as you, do not have the same accent as you? Because if your world is made up of people that are just like you, then you have a real problem in the job that you're doing. Because you're not doing it on purpose, but you probably don't consider other communities because we haven't become human to you, because we haven't become people in your lives.
Or you're only meeting people, encountering Muslims when they are contributors in a piece.
Exactly.
You know, that's something that I've heard a lot from people, is saying that people within their teams, they don't socialise, you know, with brown people and Muslims outside of their 100% agree with so much stuff that you've said. You know, I think when I was presenting on the Asian Network, just the fact that I was able to use that word Islamophobia freely, you know, to just validate what people were going through. Like, it feels a bare basic, but just...
But did you feel you could use that term because you were presenting for the Asian Network and you felt safe there?
Yeah, of course. Of course, I've room in it, because more often than not, I'm working in pretty much predominantly white teams, doing a very different side of the job. And, you know, the whole class thing and, like, echo chambers, and for me, like, having moved back up north now, like, obviously, as you know, I'm mixed race. I have my Pakistani family who I sit down and have conversations with, but then I have very white working class family from Salford and Merseyside who I sit and have conversations, and I hear the same thing from both of them, where they feel alienated and like they have genuine grievances that have been ignored. And like, when we can't have those conversations meaningfully, we are contributing to making Muslims more unsafe.
So Naz, I'm going to pick up on this. There's a really interesting stat that the Creative Diversity Network did for 2022. So while Muslims are 6.5 of the UK's population, they only represent 2.5 of the TV industry, and that's obviously way less when you think about leadership roles. The portrayal of Muslims, as we've all talked about here, is incredibly important to how we are seen on TV. How do you address that, Naz? Because you have commissioned some brilliant programmes at BBC Three that have addressed it in a really entertaining way, in an informative way, and have taken us into people's lives that are surprising, and they're Muslims. Obviously, I'm talking about the Khans. But how important is that to represent those programmes? And second question, sorry, I'm going to add it in. How hard is it to find indies to do that stuff for you?
So just want to pick up on one point, and you know, we heard it at the McTaggart last night, which is, you know, the industry is overwhelmingly middle class, right? And we know statistically that Muslims are more likely to come from low income backgrounds, therefore working class. So, you know, you can see already there's a massive dichotomy of who's in this industry. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, yes, you know, we're trying all the time, and I talk about it a lot. And to be honest, even the events of the last few weeks haven't really ignited or accelerated those conversations, because I feel like I'm in a privileged place. I can have those conversations already. But yes, it's interesting, because when you look at the creative supply base, you know, I very rarely meet development teams where, you know, a head of development who's of colour, let alone an exec who you know, I'm obviously making assumptions, so I wouldn't ask, but might be Muslim or Muslim heritage, right? So that's automatically telling you, you know, the people that are kind of developing ideas, you know, what are their life experiences? Because more often than not, I'm in their world, but are they in my world, right? So you're absolutely right. There's something about our creative supply community, because actually there's been a lot of emphasis on broadcasters and commissioners, and I think we're pretty good at the BBC. I think nearly 5% are now, you know, of Muslim heritage in terms of commissioners at the BBC. I think that's a good stat, right? But I think there is something about the sort of supply chain, like who's generating those ideas and what have their life contact being with Muslims, because I'm very conscious of the fact that, you know, I often sort of attend probably a Zoom a week where I absolutely know, and I can sort of see it in the sort of body language, that, you know, there might be someone on that Zoom that this is the first time they've seen someone like me actually speak English and talk to them. And you can almost see it, you can just tell from, you know, and I always do think, oh, where are you Zooming me from? You know, like, oh, I'm out in the sticks. Like, where are you out in the sticks, you know? So you sort of know this is the first time they're actually having a conversation with somebody who might be visibly Muslim, right? So yeah, I feel like we're already having those conversations, but we need the supply, we need the ideas, right?
It's not just the idea. I feel like it's not just lack of representation from us. It's their unconscious bias as well. So even if they do hear from us, so you can propose an idea about a lollipop lady with hemorrhoids, let's say, just for argument's sake. So you can come and present this idea. This lollipop lady happens to be Muslim, and it just happens that she could be absolutely anything. But because of their unconscious bias, they're like, okay, so is she involved in terrorist activities? No, she's not. Okay. Did she have an arranged marriage? No, she didn't. So it's like, when it gets, because, you know, like I'm a writer, I've got stuff in development, and I used to, because, you know, at the beginning, you need the work. You're like, okay, I'll do whatever. But it's got to a point where as soon as that, they try to sway that narrative into what they think people want to see Muslims being, or what they think Muslims are. And it's like, sometimes you just want to tell them, shut up and listen. And that's what it is. So, like, alhamdulillah, I've got to a point where I can be a bit picky. Like, I'm working with Gina at the moment. Pew, 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 pew. And it's because, like, it's so rare to have someone who just really listens to our experiences as individuals, not as Muslims, but just as individuals. And I think that's where a lot of the problems are, is that they already have preempted ideas of what we are, and that's what needs to be like.
Well, no experience. You know, they may never have met anyone like you. And actually, you know, because of the industry's makeup, you know, we know from the data and McTaggart last night, you know, I'm under no illusion that there are lots of people that probably would never have spoken to a person of colour until they join the workforce, right?
So 100%,
So,
100%.
whereas I've lived in so many communities, I've lived up and down the UK, worked in so many cities, I'm always in everyone else's world. And I really do think that who's in my world, that's something that I'm very conscious of.
Yeah, and the only way they've ever been in your world is based on what they've already seen on TV. So it's like a vicious circle. They've already preempted what you are based on what you've seen on TV, and what we've seen on TV is misrepresentation of what we are. So it's just like, it has to get to a point where we just need you to listen. That's it.
We need to break the cycle, but this is the problem, is when they see one thing work, they want that's the thing they hang on to.
Yeah.
So once we are
So you're basically saying that the one thing that works in terms of portrayal for Muslims are terrorists, honour killings.
No.
Is that what you're saying?
No. What I'm saying, well, I mean, for them, that's what worked for a very long time. It wasn't it? It's the only thing they could see. Because it also served their political narratives, but we won't get political. But what I'm saying is, so after We Are Lady Parts, season 1 came out, I will promise you that every single Muslim writer that you speak to will tell you that if they pitched an idea to someone which was so far removed from We Are Lady Parts, the thing that would be mentioned by that production company or that exec or whatever would be either, oh, could it be a wee bit more We Are Lady Parts, or We Are Lady Parts, because
my God,
that's the only thing that they have seen Muslims, and especially visible Muslim women, that has been a success. And I'll be honest, when we went into the season 2 room, we had a very open conversation about this, and Nida is very aware that that's what was happening, and it really frustrates her, because the whole point of one show breaking through is going, look, one show's done it, this is one version of it, but imagine all the other shows that could exist. But the problem is, and I hate the word risk, but they see us as a risk because of all the stuff Ola was saying as well. It's they're very comfortable in the versions that they know. And the thing is, before something like We Are Lady Parts was a success, they probably would never have imagined something like that being on screen, or Man Like Mubin and things like that. It's because there has been someone that said, let's give this a go. And then it's been huge, but for some reason they won't repeat that, let's give this a go.
Can I just, because I want to bring some joy into this, and when I talk to you on the phone, the thing that you spoke about so beautifully and eloquently was what it was like working in a writer's room where you were just surrounded by South Asian people or Muslim women. And talk to me about what that felt, because I want people to hear what that feels like when you are working in a safe environment where you can say what you want.
Yeah.
I think it's so important for people to understand what it is like when you are working in a room where you can be your true, authentic self.
So the season 1 was an all-Muslim room, mix of genders, mix of ethnicities, but the season 2 room, because we were going to start exploring more sensitive topics, so Nida wanted an all-female room, and so we had an all-female room, different ethnicities, different versions of following the faith, some practicing, some not so practicing, different sects, different sexualities, and most of us didn't know each other when we went into that room on day 1. And one of the producers, John, we never saw him at all that week because he purposely stayed away because he didn't want to ruin, even by popping in and saying hi, he didn't want to ruin the dynamic. So it was an all-female room. It was like therapy at points. We felt so safe just talking about things we would probably never talk about with other people. I can see it all on the screen. I can see all of our conversations on the screen. I can see the richness that's come to the show because of that.
Yeah.
By our final day, we were crying because we had to leave each other. We have a WhatsApp group now where we stay in touch and all of that. But
Did you do your best work in that room because of the environment that you were in? And this is a really important point.
Some of it, yeah. I mean, the way that room worked is a development room. So we always knew she was going to write the full kind of season because it's such a short season. But we gave everything of ourselves in that. But I don't think that is just necessarily a room with just people like us that can happen. I've been working with producers both in film and TV and production companies who create that environment. I'm currently developing an adaptation of a book, which Nancy's in the audience. Hi, Nancy. For a company in Glasgow called Freedom Scripted. I have felt so supported, so listened to. When I got into development with Film 4, there was an exec there called Sam Lavender I worked with, and I was a newbie, first feature kind of thing. I'm writing a story about Muslim soldiers in World War I, and every time he gave me a note, he started with, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's so simple. It's so simple. It's someone saying, I have decades of experience in Oscars and all of this, but I recognize that I don't have your lived experience and I want to learn and I want us to work together and I want to put the story on screen.
So Tez, obviously similar worlds in terms of the work that you've done, Man Like Bobine. Do you recognise any of that, just in terms of the lived experience, the listening to you, the kind of bringing in the worlds that you come from into your world when it comes into writing and performance? Can you identify with any of that stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on Man Like Bobine, working with Guz was such a joy, and we were given so much freedom because it was Guz's show. We were given so much freedom to improvise and be ourselves. And Ollie was the director the first 3 seasons, and Jill was the producer, who was brilliant, Jill Howes. And they gave us that freedom to do that because they trusted us. I don't know why, but they just did. And I guess they maybe realised that if they allowed us to be authentic selves, it's going to be a better show. But in my experience, indies are full of wonderful, lovely, supportive people. That's been my experience in developing stuff and in development, and then getting it to the point where a commissioner will inevitably say no. But the 2 times that I have had stuff commissioned, and it was a blap for Channel 4, which was the same year as Lady Pot, so we can guess which one went to commission, and because there's only room for one, and it's like the Highlander, there can be only one, and then the 10 o'clock show, which was also on Channel 4, and the first one was Tanya Qureshi, I think it's at BBC now, and the second one was Saida. So the only 2 times I've ever had anything commissioned is when there's people from Muslim backgrounds in those roles.
Can I be the Grinch?
Champions.
Sorry.
Wait a minute. Carry on.
So any other times where, so unfortunately, so how those pilots made, so the pilot for the Black Channel 4 Black Bounty, and then the 10 o'clock show pilots, and then when it came to like the decisions being made whether or not they should go to full series, Saida moved on, Tanya moved on, and so so the decision making then went to someone else who didn't quite get it, and it was like, yeah, but it doesn't matter if you don't get it. And it seems to me like commissioners are still stuck in commissioning things in their own image. And I think that's the need to almost take their ego out of it and take their own taste out of it. And I feel like that's not happening yet. Because the amount of stuff that gets to TV that flops because it's commissioners and execs who come up here to the Fringe Festival, see stuff here that they love, that works at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, but doesn't have any commercial appeal. Because the Fringe is a thing in of itself. It's not a commercial festival. It's a festival of people who love who love comedy, and who love a certain type of comedy in the main.
And can I just say that is the same for factual, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like, even though it's a similar medium, like, you know, so much of the storytelling, of course, about Muslims has been in proximity to violence. And I think I've gone on my own journey. I do a lot of true crime storytelling. And so having a sit down with some people, I do a lot covering cases where, you know, women have been killed by men, and every now and then a case that just so happens to involve a brown woman may come up. And I don't say to myself, I'm not going to give her the respect of telling that story. I will try and tackle it. But I had a conversation with an exec where I said, to be perfectly honest, we should just be telling this story within the context of violence against women and girls, like what we've called honour violence, you know, somebody's movements being controlled or how they dress or something. That's coercive control. Like, we know how to define that as a crime. Like, let me tell the story. Let's make it about the misogyny and the violence against women and girls, not about religion. You know, those slight tonal changes can make a huge difference where we're still not, you know, saying let's never ever talk about issues. We need to. That's our role in making a healthy democracy. But them small, slight changes where the focus is not on the colour of the skin or the religion can make a huge difference.
But that's that unconscious bias, isn't it? Of like, if it's someone from a certain background, those additional words are added on.
Yeah.
So even with the riots, I mean, that was terrorism. Let's be honest, that was terrorism.
And that was misogyny as well. We're doing this for our women and girls. You know, we're going to take back the streets for women and girls.
But that language wasn't used in that way. However, when they thought the whole thing that kicked it off, that that attacker could possibly be Muslim or whatever, is he Muslim? Is he an asylum seeker? Is he this? Is he that? It's like all that language is applied to a person who you don't even know who they are yet. But when you're actually seeing violence on screen, and these crimes being committed and people being attacked, it's mental illness, or it's these people they have a right to protest, and all of that's systemic. These problems are, and this is language that we need to dismantle. And in some ways, what's been really concerning for me is we started having some of these conversations after George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter, and we started to see little bits of change. And then it kind of all went quiet because
it's not cool anymore. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It was an event which was absolutely horrendous. It galvanised a massive movement, and everybody got on board with it, and as they should have done, quite rightly. But some people did it for one reason. Other people did it because they felt if they didn't, they would be seen a certain way. So I've never, have we ever seen anyone with a black square on their Instagram? I mean, everyone did it because they thought they needed to, and then they kind of like moved on. And I think this is where, just picking up what Raisa was saying, I think this is where the broadcasters themselves have, in this instance with what we're talking about, they've really let us down over the last couple of weeks, because the terminology that was used and the way it was all worded about, they were race riots, it was violence, it was misogyny, and it was pure racism. But in all of the news broadcasts, BBC, ITV, Channel 4 were a bit more open about it, I would say. They said these pro-British protesters. I'm like, pro-British protesters? They're not protesting anything, because as far as I can see, they don't have placards with a point of view on it. They're screaming racist abuse. You haven't used the word racism at all. The only time I've ever heard the word racism used in the news broadcast was when they were all caught and the sentences were laid down and they were repeating what was said in the court, and the word racism was used by the judge. So I think I feel like we've been let down by the broadcasters, but not only in the arena of how this was reported. I think it's been a kind of drip effect of how things have been framed over the years. And like you were saying about how you felt in the writer's room, I don't feel like I've had that experience. I haven't been able to have that experience in the non-scripted world because the Muslim workforce just isn't there. And so, you know, because I'm like a dinosaur, so I'm here, but people that are younger than me, there might be the odd newbie, there's the occasional AP, possibly, but there aren't anywhere near enough Muslim people working in television
So
doing things that are not, there's a lot in scripted, which I'm really pleased about, and those stories can be told because those are stories, as in like stories with a capital S. They're not I mean, they're reflected in truth, you know, they're based in truth, but they're not actuality. And they're certainly, and I'm kind of a bit of I'm almost like a bit of an anomaly in that I sort of, you know, I don't do the whole like jazz hands thing, although if anyone wants to give me a jazz hands show, Saturday nights is where it's all about, and I can do that for you, plug. But
have you made that decision to be Mr. Jazz Hands Saturday night? I am not doing, you know, when Naz was talking about supplier base, the kind of, have you made a decision that you are not the kind of shows that you do?
No, not at all. Because, like, well, I'm an indie producer, aren't I? So I will do everything.
Yeah.
And I will do it very well.
Yeah.
But no, we've done Specialist Factual. You know, we did a film about Agatha Christie, which is not like, you know, it's not like a thing, but we do documentaries, and it wasn't a conscious decision. It just happens to be the type of programming that I grew up watching. I love entertainment shows. I love my quizzes. I love my studio shows and all that, and that's what I wanted to do. And because I love those shows, I felt like I could do those shows better if I was making them.
But as one of the few Muslim-owned indies, do you feel that you have an obligation, or do you feel that you should be doing more programming that is reflecting Muslims in a wider way?
We pitch stuff all the time. It's not that we're not trying. They just haven't been taken on. And, you know, some people can say that's because, like, you know, the idea wasn't quite right, or they weren't looking for it at that time, or, you know, all of the reasons you get for a no. It can be that. It's just that we haven't had something like that goes, King of Sunshine has made this Muslim tale, you know, whatever it is. But that's not because I don't think we should be, because I would feel annoyed if it was me and then, you know, a white indie that got that thing that it should be a story that we're telling. But at the same time, I don't feel like I should only be reached out to by
because
companies.
Of that.
Because
Tez,
of
I'm
that.
going to come to you, Ola, quickly.
So I just wanted to pick up on what Tez and Raisa said. I watched your blap. I thought it was really good, by the way.
Thank you, mate.
Let people know it was very, really good.
It's the most watched blap in Channel 4 history.
Oh, was it?
Double of the second place. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
But, okay.
Move on. Go on. Carry on.
I'm not bitter.
So, no, I did watch it, and I just wanted to pick up on the fact that he said he worked with Guz, and it was very authentic and this and that. And I'm not being the Grinch. When I found out about We Are Lady Parts, I was really excited, Muslim band. But there are always issues within issues, like the cast, they're not Muslim. Yeah. I went to the Comedy Awards 3 years ago, and people kept coming up to me and congratulating me and telling me how well I play guitar, because... do you know what I mean? Because I was the only hijabi in that room, and she's not hijabi, she's not Muslim, so they all assumed it was me. So from that perspective, I think that was a massive downfall, because there's a lot of really talented Muslim actresses, and I think the issue with that, especially in the first season, I think there's a lot of, because it was, We Are Lady Parts was good. I think it was very artistic. I think it was directed beautifully. I personally don't think it's a reflection of your, like, of Muslim women. I think there's more, it's an easy watch, and it was targeted, in my opinion, for a certain audience. I haven't seen season 2, so I could eat my words. But in the sense that, they did take the first steps, but they weren't Muslim casting. It wasn't, at the time, it wasn't like the hijab. I'm not saying, it's not a judgment of Nida not being hijabi, like that doesn't even matter. But it's like, why did she make them hijab? And we, as hijabis, we can't help but feel that that was done purposely to give it that extra, you know, like, bazam, you know, they're hijabis and they're doing this or whatever. So I think that's where kind of my disappointment came from.
But just picking up on that, the point is that because we have so few programs around Muslims, that it's okay to have a program like Lady Parts that looks at a world like that.
Of course.
But if you do not have other programs that are authentic, that look at other examples, you are always going to keep coming back to the one show, Man Like Mobeen, or We Are Lady Parts, or The Khans, because you don't have enough representation that shows you the broader reach of what Muslims are like in this country. We end up just being pigeonholed in one show. So that show might not have appealed to you, but it would have appealed to lots of other people.
But who are these other people? That's my question. So, like, this whole thing about, so when they put Muslim women on TV, if they make them like really sweary, like I've had to turn down a lot of casting rounds. This is not me like blowing smoke up my own arse, but I've turned down a lot of stuff because they always want me to be either very sweary or very over-sexualized, or and they think that by doing this you're empowering Muslim women, but you're not. You're taking.
But forgive me for disagreeing with you, but that show appealed to me. I saw in that lead singer a version of who I wanted to be.
100%.
So it absolutely did appeal to me in my world. I totally get that.
I'm not taken away from that. Like I said, the prospect of having a Muslim band, because I'm a comedian, I'm a hijabi comedian, that doesn't really happen. So seeing someone who's Muslim doing something that's out of the norm, that's empowering, that's amazing, but there's certain boundaries. Like, when was the last time you saw a niqabi smoking pot? Like, it just doesn't...
they're trying to make you seem rebellious. That's the thing. They're trying to undo this image of, you're oppressed in one instance, but we'll portray you as rebellious.
Exactly.
And we've seen so much of this lazy like narrative about
100%.
Muslim women.
I love that they're breaking the norms. I love that, you know, you're showing Muslim women as not just these oppressed whatever. I absolutely love that about the show. You don't have to go that extra step to show us as rebellious, to show us like this, to show, like, we talk about Muslim representation. It shouldn't even be about Muslim representation. It should be about making TV with Muslim characters being ordinary people. It's not about, I'm doing a show, I'm doing a blab at the moment called The Pharmacy, about a pharmacist. That pharmacist could be absolutely anyone in the universe, but it just happens that it's played by me because I wrote it because I'm a clinical pharmacist. That's what I was brought up doing. But that show has absolutely nothing to do about my faith. It's about incorporating Muslims in TV and making them normal parts of the public. So the next time you bump into a Muslim person, you could be like, oh, you know what, I watched Man Like Mobeen and that guy, he did X, Y, Z. It's got nothing to do with the rest. And it normalizes us. It normalizes as a normal part of society rather than extreming us from either being super rebellious or being terrorist. That's what I believe Muslim representation really should be about, normalizing us as normal part of the community.
Well, that's where we started.
Hold on, let me bring in before he explodes.
So the point's been made that I was going to make is that execs commissioners get super excited by pitches and ideas where we are kind of Muslim plus. So we're Muslim, but what's the other thing you are as well? Oh, you're a pot-smoking niqabi. That, yum, 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 yum. Yes, please. Oh, you question your sexuality. Great. Oh my God, Muslims are only 6.5% of the population and 10% of people are sort of from the LGBT community. But forget the other 90% of Muslims. This is brilliant. This is what we want. It's because it's what they want, and it's almost like this patronizing paternal instinct kicks in, where it's like, no, we can't let Muslims be their authentic selves because that equals repression and repression, and so. To portray that on TV would actually be problematic. So let's portray the ones that are rebelling against their culture, the ones that are rebelling against their parents, so to speak. And it's like, no, where are our boring stories? We went straight from nothing to pot-smoking niqabis. And we had nothing. We didn't have the bit in between. We didn't have the Muslim royal family. We didn't have the Muslim modern, like the I've forgotten the name of the shows now, but like we didn't get the boring, funny Muslim stories of like the authentic conservative. Like, I mean, we got bloody Citizen Khan, but like, but that's the equivalent of Mrs. Brown's Boys. But we didn't get the sort of good quality normal Muslim representation, and we went straight to the like
Now,
sort
so I'm
of
going to bring you in
craziness.
a few minutes. But I totally understand that, and from a factual point of view, and Amber, I can imagine you can identify with this. We are vox pops. So when stuff happens, we become a vox pop. We never become long form documentaries. In that way, where you are able to kind of have a viewpoint of who this community is or what we are or a cross-section of it, that you are never allowed to do that you are just a vox pop. And that feels that we become vox pops when shit kicks off.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course you do. And I think also when you make access documentaries and people lean on you to be the person that goes out into that community and, you know, you're the one that's going to gain the trust and you're going to win them around. Like, you know, I and colleagues I know have had really traumatic experiences of that, where it's like you're going in there on your own sometimes because that's the best way to kind of like build trust with people, putting a lot of your spare time in, and you're saying to them with genuine sincerity, I promise you it's going to be different this time. And then you are blocked out of the edit or you're not allowed into the edit. And I swear to God, I think there's this misconception that when you're talent, you're a presenter, it's really glamorous and all this, but you are the face of it. So when shit hits the fan, it's you that's people are going to say. They don't understand that there's a whole exec or commissioners or any of that stuff. They just see you and they're like, you said you weren't going to do this to us. And then you think, well, why are we even doing this? Like, I didn't sign up for it for that reason. Like, you want to make, you know, as sad as it sounds, like the world a little bit of a better place, not try to make it worse somehow and regress like it seems to be now. So it's that aspect of it is really challenging.
It's a burden. You have to carry that responsibility when you look and sound like us.
Yeah.
We are never allowed to leave that responsibility at the door and just become filmmakers or people who run indies or comedians. We have a burden of responsibility to a community because there are so few of us that we carry, and then we do our day job. Naz, bring you back.
I was just going to pick up on the point of normalisation, because we've been talking a lot about ethnocentric content, so essentially content from our life experience, and I totally welcome that and value that, and so do all my commissioning colleagues. But interestingly, my focus is the normalisation, so it's casting, you know, people onto Glow Up, Rap Game, Krept and Conan, they're Muslim. We've got, I love it when I see Muslim property owners on our daytime shows. It makes me really happy because that's a reality, right? So I think these things are happening, and there is sometimes an unfair emphasis on commissioning ethnocentric content. But the truth is, it's all in train. We've all got it. We're all doing it at the BBC. And we forget that normalisation is actually the most powerful thing. So when you see Zainab and Mabeen on Race Across the World or Ishan Akbar on Pilgrimage, they're the most powerful thing. And sometimes as Muslim creative people, and I met a few yesterday, and I did speak to one who pitched an ethnocentric idea, and I said to her, I hope you don't mind me saying, but I think it would have been more powerful if you just pitched an idea, right? Yeah. Because sometimes we fall into that trap a little bit to get our first commission. I did it, to get my first fresh film on BBC Three sort of 17, 18 years ago, that's what I did. And so I think we've, in some ways, got to almost resist that, almost amnesty, say, right, actually, we're just going to be. Because being Muslim is really profound. You know, my daily life is boring stuff like parenting and, you know, childcare and all that kind of stuff. But the truth is, being Muslim is quite deep. It's not, you know, it's not there for everyone to see. I know it may appear that way, but it isn't actually. I'm not talking about it on a day-to-day basis. So I think sometimes we've got to have that confidence a little bit to say, right, we're here. I want to work on your biggest reality show. I want to do this. I want to do that, right? So that's what I'm saying.
That's really interesting because I think just being is such a good way of describing it. But actually, but just being as a Muslim in the media, just being is actually really difficult. That's a job in itself. And we can talk about contributors on Escape to the Country and like Race Across the World, and it's brilliant, and I love seeing it. And I think it's I always go, oh great, you know, they're there. Yeah. That's I was going to say it's not an easy fix, but that's one way of portraying Muslim life in a show. What I find is an issue is if you think about those shows, Escape to the Country, Race Across the World, or well, not that, it doesn't have a presenter, but like game shows, with the exception of Adil Ray on Lingo, can you think of a Muslim presenter on a show that you would then go, because that's normalising it, and also it's normalising it plus, like as I was
Or a
saying.
Muslim Simon Reeve or a Muslim David
Exactly.
Attenborough, or someone
You don't
who's
get
an
it.
adventurer, you know?
And that's somebody on every day, apart from Adil doing Lingo, which is a very recent thing as well, like last 2 years, whatever. Before that, can you think of anyone that's hosted a show regularly? I can't. And even with that, on the celebrity version, the nighttime version of Lingo, he doesn't host that, RuPaul does.
But it's worse than scripted as well. I mean,
Scripted is
BBC
dire.
scripted. Like, what are we
Dire.
seeing? Like, you can't get the commissions because, one, they're really difficult because they want the same people that have always written the same things that they feel safe with. And I mean, yeah, the McTaggart yesterday I thought was so inspirational because what he said around, you know, places like the BBC, Channel 4, so on, should be like the state school equivalent. I thought that was such a good way of putting it, where actually we need to be exceptional, right? We can't just be like, we're going to go make our first show. We have this weight on us where if that first show fails, we probably won't get another chance.
Or the amount of time people, my middle class colleague, get chance after chance after chance to then make something that is brilliant. And you're like, well, where's my chance after chance after chance? Like, where's my mate's chance after chance after chance?
We're not allowed to fail, and I think that is a huge pressure, that everybody makes mistakes, we're all human. When we make mistakes, we are judged incredibly harshly.
And then the risk on us is like
Yeah.
legitimised.
And also you shut the door for 10 people behind you as well.
Totally,
And
but I
there's no
think that applies to
mentors, there's
everybody
no people.
in terms of, you know, I think that applies to working class people, disability. When we have, you know, when we are othered, the spotlight is on us, and so therefore we can't fail. The other thing is that normalisation. There are so many questions here, and the key question is, how can broadcasters help us? We are totally running out of time, I apologise, but it's a key question that keeps coming up again and again and again. How can we build fruitful relationships with programme makers? How can broadcasters offer us a bigger slate? How do we get more Muslim background people into the upper echelons of broadcasting corridor powers? We have been asking these questions for the last 20 years, and we are sitting now in 2024, and we still do not see people like that. I have no answers to this anymore. I honestly do not know what to say about this. If you guys do, take it.
I think about the session you did with Mira Sayal last year, and the thing that stayed with me is her saying that goodness gracious me happened because the power structures within commissioning at the time meant that a producer could say, I've got a pot of money, I'm going to commission this because I believe in it, and they don't need to go through 10 different levels of execs. And I think there are really good people from all backgrounds wanting to work with people from all backgrounds, but where things fail is when it needs to go to the one decision maker who says, okay, yeah, fine. And that decision maker, you're not pitching to them directly. You're having to
There's multiple layers,
go through multiple layers.
Yeah.
So I wish we still had something like that, where these producers who have been working with you every day can go, yep, let's go make the thing.
Right, final quick one.
I know we're in a different landscape here, but I want to make the comparison to America. And I know it's so different because there's so much more money over there and the landscape is so different and there's a bigger population. It's a continent more than it is a country. But we laugh at America and its problems and particularly its relationship with race so much. But if you look at the commissioning that comes out of America, the TV shows, the representation of their different communities, whether that's an East Asian community, whether it's an Arab communities, whether it's the Latino communities, the amount of good quality TV that comes out of America that represents the different races that make up that country and also the different roles that people get to play in stuff that gets commissioned that isn't just ethnocentric. So Brooklyn Nine-Nine, for example, right? That's a brilliant TV show with such a diverse cast that makes that show so much better. But Green Wing, and I know that's 20 years ago, but Green Wing was a very good show, but it was a story that was set in a hospital without a single Asian character. Are you fucking kidding me?
The difference with America is they've got Ava over there, they've got Shonda over there, they've got Mindy over there. You cannot point to those people over here. Guys, could you please give it up for these guys? They did this panel very quickly. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.